Ladies and gentlemen, there is a moment in every person's life when their instinct tells them to jump up, defend themselves, and prove their worth. It might happen at work, in a relationship, in front of a family member, or even in front of a stranger online. That moment feels like a surge of electricity under your skin. Your heart races, your chest tightens, your mind races with arguments you could launch like arrows. And yet, as a neuroscientist who has spent decades studying the stress response, decision-making, and social behavior, I'm here to tell you that this instinct, this almost automatic need to defend yourself, is rarely your ally. In fact, it is often the very thing that erodes your credibility, drains your emotional energy, and traps you in cycles of conflict you never wanted to be part of. Think about the last time someone misunderstood you. Maybe they accused you of something you didn't do. Maybe they twisted your words. Maybe they questioned your motives. You probably felt an immediate rush to explain, to correct, to fight back. That's normal. Your brain is wired for survival. When we feel threatened physically or socially, our amygdala lights up like a fire alarm, releasing cortisol and adrenaline. In ancient times, that reaction helped us escape predators or defend ourselves in combat. Today, most of our predators are words, assumptions, and opinions. But our brain doesn't know the difference. It still primes us for battle. Here's the problem: the social battlefield is not won by speed or ferocity. It's shaped by perception. The person who stays calm, grounded, and unshaken gains an invisible authority. The person who rushes to defend themselves looks reactive, even if they're telling the truth. This is not fair, but it's real. Studies in social psychology show that when individuals defend themselves aggressively, observers often assume guilt, even without evidence. It's a phenomenon known as the defensive attribution bias. In simple terms, if you look defensive, people assume you've got something to hide. Let me share a story. A young physician I mentored once came to me in tears. She had been accused by a senior colleague of making a clinical mistake she didn't make. Her first instinct was to send a long email explaining every detail of what happened. She wrote and rewrote that email until midnight. She wanted to hit send, but something in her paused. She called me. I told her, wait, don't defend yourself yet. Gather the facts. Stay calm. Ask questions instead of launching explanations. The next morning, she went to that senior colleague and simply said, I'd like to understand what led you to that conclusion. That single question changed everything. It moved the conversation from accusation to exploration. By the end of the day, her name was cleared and her reputation rose because she had remained calm under fire. This is what happens when you stop defending yourself. You stop pouring fuel on a fire someone else lit. You step back, you let oxygen run out, and the flames die on their own. You also signal, and to others, that your worth is not up for debate. That your identity, your values, your truth do not need an emergency press conference. From a neurological perspective, not defending yourself also has profound health benefits. When you resist that fight or flight impulse, you activate your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for rational thought, empathy, and long-term planning. You regulate your nervous system, reduce cortisol spikes, and protect your heart from the wear and tear of chronic stress. Over time, this makes you less reactive, more strategic, and surprisingly more persuasive. People trust you more when you don't rush to prove yourself. They lean in. They wonder if she's not scrambling to defend herself. Maybe she really is solid. Maybe she knows something I don't. There's another dimension: emotional self-respect. Every time you defend yourself to someone who isn't interested in understanding you, you teach your nervous system that their opinion has the power to destabilize you. You hand over control of your self-concept. But when you choose not to defend yourself, when you take a breath, stand still, and let their words pass through like wind, you reclaim that control. You're telling your own brain, I decide what defines me. That's an act of inner leadership. I remember another case, this time a public figure, a scientist under intense media scrutiny. False allegations swirled around him on social media. His communications team begged him to issue an immediate, fiery rebuttal. He refused. Instead, he kept publishing his research, kept showing up to his lectures, kept being visible and consistent. At first, the accusations got louder. Then, slowly, they faded because he had not given them fresh oxygen. He had not turned the controversy into a spectacle. Years later, people remember the science, not the scandal. Some of you might be thinking, but if I don't defend myself, aren't I letting people walk over me? Won't silence be seen as guilt? That's a reasonable fear, but not defending yourself doesn't mean being passive. It means choosing your response strategically rather than reflexively. It means you gather facts, you speak when the timing is right, and you frame your message with calm authority. It's the difference between a boxer flailing in panic and a martial artist standing still, letting the opponent's energy exhaust itself before making one deliberate move. The more you practice this, the more you'll notice a subtle shift. Conflicts that once consumed you begin to shrink. Conversations that used to escalate now de-escalate. People who thrived on your reactivity lose interest. You'll also discover how much mental space you gain when you're not constantly rehearsing defenses in your head. That space becomes creative energy. It becomes clearer thinking. It becomes better sleep at night. Ladies and gentlemen, in a world obsessed with instant reactions, where every disagreement is a potential viral clip and every comment feels like an attack, the rarest and most powerful move is restraint. To pause, to choose not to defend yourself until you have clarity. That pause is not weakness, it's power. Now imagine applying this to your personal relationships. Someone you love makes a hurtful comment. Instead of firing back or launching into a long defense, you take a breath and say, "I hear that you're upset." This shifts the dynamic from combat to curiosity. You stop the loop of accusation and justification. You model emotional maturity. Over time, your relationships become less about point scoring and more about understanding. This is not just a communication tactic. It's a nervous system practice. Every time you pause, you're rewiring your brain. You're teaching your amygdala that not every perceived threat needs a fight. You're strengthening your vagus nerve, which calms your heart rate and supports emotional regulation. You're becoming less of a hostage to other people's narratives. And yes, there will be times when you must speak, when silence would be complicit, when your rights or your safety are at stake. But even then, your power lies in how you speak, in the steadiness of your tone, in the clarity of your words, in the fact that you've chosen the timing rather than reacting on impulse. This is how you transform from a defender into a leader. When you master this, something remarkable happens. People start treating you differently. They sense your groundedness. They stop pushing your buttons because your buttons no longer work. You become, in their eyes, someone who cannot be easily provoked or manipulated. That is one of the greatest shields you can carry in today's world. This approach has roots not only in neuroscience, but also in centuries of wisdom traditions. Stoic philosophers taught the value of indifference to insult. Eastern practices teach the power of non-reactivity. Modern therapy calls it emotional regulation. Different languages, same principle. You do not have to defend yourself to everyone who challenges you. Your dignity is not a debate. As you begin practicing this, start small. Next time someone misinterprets you in a meeting, instead of rushing to correct them, pause. Let the silence hang for a beat. Ask a clarifying question. Or simply let the moment pass. Notice what happens in the room. 9 times out of 10, someone else will correct the misunderstanding for you, or the conversation will move on. The sky does not fall. In fact, your stature rises, and as you get better at this in small moments, you'll be ready for the bigger ones. The public criticisms, the family conflicts, the high-stakes negotiations. You'll find that you don't just save your energy, you shape the narrative by your very composure. You become the calm center of a storm. You may even notice that your own inner dialogue becomes kinder. When you stop defending yourself outwardly, you also stop prosecuting yourself inwardly. You become less judgmental of your own mistakes. You begin to trust your own intentions again. This is a quiet but profound transformation, one that ripples out into every corner of your life. That is why, ladies and gentlemen, not defending yourself is not a passive retreat. It is an active, deliberate practice of self-respect, nervous system mastery, and social intelligence. It is a skill that can change your health, your relationships, and your influence. And yet, I know that putting this into action can feel uncomfortable at first. Your whole body will want to jump in and explain, to fight, to clear your name. That urge is ancient. It's survival-driven. But survival in our modern world requires a different kind of strength, the strength to pause, to observe, to respond only when it serves your highest values. We left off right as we were about to go deeper into how to actually practice this skill every day and to close the talk in a powerful way. I'll continue exactly where the script stopped without repeating or summarizing anything. That urge is ancient. It's survival driven. But survival in our modern world requires a different kind of strength. The strength to pause, to observe, to respond only when it serves your highest values. So how do you build that strength? Not in a crisis, but in the small, ordinary moments of life. The same way athletes train before a big game, you train your nervous system before the big confrontation. Every time you get an email that irritates you, pause before responding. Every time someone posts something about you on social media that feels unfair, wait an hour before replying. Every time a loved one misreads your intention, take a breath before explaining. Those tiny pauses are like micro reps in a mental gym. They seem small, but they create new neural pathways. They give your prefrontal cortex a chance to come online before your amygdala runs the show. One of the simplest and most powerful tools you can use is the physiological sigh, a double inhale followed by a slow exhale. In one study at Stanford, just 3 of those breaths dropped participants' heart rate and stress hormones significantly. I teach my students to do it whenever they feel the defensive surge rising. Nobody even notices you're doing it. But inside, you're lowering the alarm and raising your clarity. Another practice is to replace your first defensive thought with a curious question. Instead of, how dare they say that? You ask, I wonder what's driving them to think that. This does 2 things. It shifts you from threat mode to learning mode, and it slows down the whole interaction. Curiosity is kryptonite to reactivity. I also recommend rehearsing calm phrases that you can deploy instead of explanations. Things like, I hear what you're saying, or that's an interesting perspective, or simply, thank you for sharing that. These are not admissions of guilt. They're placeholders that give you time to think. They signal composure and keep you from being dragged into a verbal tug of war. Over weeks and months of practicing these skills, something remarkable happens inside you. You begin to trust your own restraint. You stop fearing that if you don't defend yourself, you'll be destroyed. You discover that most accusations collapse under their own weight if you don't prop them up with your energy. You learn viscerally that your self-worth is not up for cross-examination. And this inner shift changes the outer world. Colleagues start consulting you instead of challenging you. Friends feel safer bringing you hard truths. Even adversaries start moderating their tone because your calm becomes contagious. You cease being the target for drama because drama cannot stick to someone who does not feed it. Does this mean you never speak up? Absolutely not. There will be times when your values or your rights require you to act. But by then, you'll be acting from choice, not compulsion. You'll be able to marshal facts, use a steady tone, and pick your moment so that your message lands with maximum credibility. That is not defending yourself, that is leading with your truth. Think of a great mountain. Storms batter it, winds howl around it, yet it stands unmoved. People admire it not because it shouts back at the sky, but because of its quiet power. That's the posture you can adopt in your own life. When the storm passes, and storms always pass, you're still standing and your integrity is intact. Let me share one more story. A woman I worked with had been going through a bitter divorce. Her ex-partner spread rumors about her finances and her parenting. Friends urged her to set the record straight. On social media, she didn't. She stayed focused on her children, on her work, on her health. For a while, the rumors raged. Then they burned out. Years later, she told me, not defending myself was the hardest thing I've ever done. But it was also the most liberating. I'm still here. My kids are thriving. The truth outlived the lies. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the paradox. You gain more real protection by releasing the urge to defend than by clinging to it. You discover that your power is not in your rebuttals, but in your presence. You become someone who does not need to prove because you are busy living. And if you remember nothing else from tonight, remember this: every time you choose not to defend yourself reflexively, you're telling your nervous system and the world, I am safe, I am solid, I am not defined by your opinion.